Welcome to The Explainer. Today we are breaking down a really big shift in U.S. foreign policy. We're talking about a brand new law that directly challenges China on the very sensitive issue of Tibet. So let's dive right in. So in the middle of 2024, the U.S. went ahead and passed a new law, one that really changes the game in its approach to the long-running dispute between Tibet and China. So you're probably asking, what is this new legislation all about? And why now? To really wrap our heads around why this new law is such a big deal, we have to rewind a bit. We need to look at a negotiation process that's been, well, pretty much frozen in time for over a decade. It wasn't always this quiet. There was a time of active engagement. Between 2002 and 2010, representatives for the Dalai Lama and China actually met 9 separate times to try and find some common ground. But then, after that last meeting in January 2010, poof, the talks just stopped. Think about that. For more than 14 years, there's been complete radio silence, a total breakdown in formal communication. And that long silence, right there, is the crucial backdrop for this new U.S. law. It's really an attempt to break that deadlock. So what's the hang-up? What's the major obstacle stopping these really important talks from getting started again? Well, it all boils down to a fundamental disagreement about the past. And right here, this is the absolute heart of the stalemate. China has set a firm, non-negotiable precondition for any new talks. The Dalai Lama has to publicly state that Tibet has always been a part of China. The Dalai Lama refuses, saying that version of history just isn't accurate. And what's really key here is that the U.S. government agrees with him. This single historical claim has put the entire dialogue on ice. So this new law isn't just about stating a preference. The U.S. is basically drawing a line in the sand, and it's grounding its entire position in some pretty solid international principles. The law basically pulls from the international rulebook, It references these core ideas like self-determination and human rights. The argument from the U.S., as folks like Secretary of State Antony Blinken have put it, is that these aren't just some Western ideas. No, they're supposed to be shared global goals for peace and freedom that should apply here too. And the central principle they're really leaning on is this right to self-determination. It's enshrined in the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. But here's the kicker. China itself signed this agreement way back in 1998. So the U.S. is essentially using principles that China has already acknowledged on the world stage to make its case. It's a pretty savvy move. Okay, so let's get into the nitty-gritty of the law itself. How does all this background translate into actual, concrete action? What does this new act really do? Officially, it's called the Promoting a Resolution to the Tibet-China Dispute Act. It was passed in July 2024 with a ton of support from both political parties. And what it does is formally change U.S. policy to take a much more active, you might even say assertive, role in this dispute. This new policy really has 3 key parts. First, it reaffirms that any talks have to happen without China's preconditions. Just get to the table. Second, it's putting money towards specifically countering what the U.S. calls disinformation from the Chinese government about Tibet's history. And third, and this is a big one, it directs U.S. agencies to actively challenge that narrative. So we're seeing a shift from just passively hoping for talks to actively trying to shape the conversation. Now, this part is really critical, and it's kind of hidden in the details. The law actually goes ahead and defines the word Tibet, and its definition includes not just the main autonomous region, but also these huge Tibetan areas inside 4 other Chinese provinces. Why does that matter so much? Because that's a much, much broader definition than the one that Chinese government uses, and it aligns way more closely with the historical and cultural boundaries that Tibetans themselves claim. So after all that, what's the big picture here? What is the ultimate takeaway from this new piece of legislation? What does this all mean for the future? This law really marks a major strategic shift. For years, the U.S. policy was just to urge both sides to talk. Now, it makes it official U.S. policy to actually counter what Congress has decided are historically inaccurate claims, the very claims that have been used to block those talks in the first place. It is a direct challenge to the very foundation of China's position. And that leaves us with the million-dollar question, doesn't it? By putting a direct challenge to a cornerstone of China's claim over Tibet into law, has the U.S. set the stage for a resolution, or will it just escalate the war of words? This act kicks off a whole new chapter in a long, very complex geopolitical story, and honestly, only time is going to tell if this bold move can finally break the deadlock, or if it will just make things even more complicated.